You know that moment when your whole perspective shifts in like 2 seconds? When someone says something to you and it just rewires how you see everything? That happened to me, but not the way you'd think. My son said 4 words to me, just 4. And honestly, they were the best thing he could have possibly said, even though, at the time, they sounded like the worst thing in the world. He said, "Dad, you're unsuccessful." Now, before you think this is some feel-good story where I get angry or defensive, let me tell you what actually happened. I stood there. I was holding my coffee. It was still hot, steam coming off the top, and I just smiled. I actually smiled. My wife was right there in the kitchen with me, and I could feel her getting tense, like she was waiting for me to blow up or something. But I didn't. I just smiled. And that smile changed everything, because that's when I made the decision that would shape the next 9 months of all our lives. I decided that my son was going to think his father was a complete and total failure. Not temporarily, not just for a day or two. I'm talking months. I'm talking about watching his life completely transform, because he believed his old man had lost everything. Now I know how that sounds. Believe me, I do. It sounds insane. It sounds like I'm some kind of psychological manipulator or something. But before you judge me, you need to understand how we got here. You need to understand who my son was, what he'd become, and why I felt like this was the only thing left that might actually work. My son was 16 years old. Good-looking kid, smart, actually really smart. His teachers loved him. When he wanted to be funny, he could make an entire room laugh. He had potential written all over him. The kind of kid that, when you look at him, you think, yeah, that one's going to do something. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. I think it happens gradually, you know? Like, you don't wake up one day and realize your kid's become this person. It creeps in slowly. First, it's little things. He doesn't want to do chores. He doesn't want to study as hard. He expects things. Not demands, just expects. Like the world owed him something because of who his father was or what his family had. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I mean, genuinely comfortable. I built a business from the ground up. Started in my garage, made mistakes, learned, grew it into something solid. Nothing crazy, but enough that we lived well. Nice house, good neighborhood. He didn't have to worry about basic things. And I really think, that comfort is what started to break him. He saw his friends working summer jobs, and he'd roll his eyes. Why would he do that when he didn't have to? Why would he apply himself in school when he could just coast and still get acceptable grades? He had his dad's business to fall back on eventually, right? Why worry? Except that's not how life works. And I knew that. I'd lived it. I'd started with nothing, fought for everything, made it work. And now I was watching my own son become the kind of person who thought life was supposed to be easy. Who thought he deserved things. Who had no concept of what it actually took to build something, to earn something, to deserve something. It bothered me. It bothered me a lot. My wife kept saying, "He's 16. He'll grow out of it." And maybe he would have. Maybe he would have eventually figured it out on his own. But I looked at him sometimes and I didn't recognize him anymore. This kid with all these possibilities, and he was just wasting them. Casually. Like they meant nothing. And the thing is, I knew it was partly my fault. I'd given him too much. Made things too easy. Removed every obstacle so he wouldn't have to struggle. I thought I was being a good father. Taking care of him. Protecting him. But what I was actually doing was slowly, systematically, removing his ability to be responsible for anything. It was just a regular day. One of those days where nothing seems particularly important when it's happening, but you realize later that it was actually a turning point. I was in my office at home. I work from there sometimes. And I'd had a bad meeting. Not catastrophic. Nothing that actually threatened the business. But one of our long-term deals fell through. Client decided to go in a different direction. Happens all the time in business, right? But I was frustrated. I was venting to my wife about it, running through what I could have done differently, what signals I missed. I wasn't even thinking about whether he was listening. Why would I? He was upstairs in his room, probably on his phone, doing whatever 16-year-olds do on the internet. I was just talking to my wife, letting off steam the way you do. But he was listening. Later that evening, after dinner, he came into my office. Just walked in. He sat down in that chair across from my desk, the one that's reserved for serious conversations, and he just looked at me for a moment. Like he was gathering the courage to say something, then he said it. "Dad, you're unsuccessful." And it wasn't mean. That's the thing that got me. It wasn't delivered with anger or malice. It was almost clinical. Like he'd been thinking about this for a while and had finally worked up the nerve to say it out loud. Like he was stating a fact that had been obvious to him for some time. I should have been furious. That's what any normal parent would have been, right? My own kid telling me I'm a failure? I should have gone off. I should have explained to him all the things I'd accomplished, all the things I'd built, how ignorant he was being. But I didn't. Instead, I felt this strange kind of clarity. Because in that moment, I understood what was really happening. This wasn't about whether I was successful or not. This was about my son. This was about who he was becoming. This was about the fact that he'd developed enough arrogance to judge his own father, to judge someone who'd spent his entire life working, without understanding the first thing about struggle, about failure, about what it actually takes to make it in this world. So I smiled, and I said something that, looking back, changed the entire trajectory of what was about to happen. I said, "You know what? You might be right." The confusion on his face was instant. He didn't know how to process that. He'd prepared himself for an argument. He'd braced for anger. But agreement? That threw him completely. "I am," he said, and his voice was smaller now. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe I haven't been as successful as I should be. Maybe I need to make some changes." And right there, I made the decision. Not consciously, not like I sat down and made a plan. But in that moment, something clicked in my brain, and I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's show him what unsuccessful really looks like. Not because I want to hurt him, but because he needs to understand something fundamental about the world. He needs to understand that comfort is fragile, that success isn't guaranteed, that when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, you don't get to just sit back and judge the people trying to fix it. You get to work. You get to sacrifice. You get to understand what your parents go through every single day to keep the family stable. I started that same week. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my wife after he'd gone to bed. We talked for hours. I explained what I was thinking, what I wanted to accomplish. I expected her to tell me I was crazy. Instead, she understood immediately. She got it. Maybe even better than I did. "How long?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "As long as it takes for him to really understand." We decided together that this was something we had to do, that the short-term discomfort, for all of us, was worth the long-term lesson. So we started small. The first thing I did was cut up my credit cards. Not all of them. I kept one hidden for genuine emergencies because I'm not completely insane. But I made sure he saw me doing it. I literally sat at the kitchen counter, pulled out my wallet, and cut up my credit cards one by one with a pair of scissors. The look on his face when he came downstairs and saw me doing that. He didn't say anything, but I could see the wheels turning. Then I started the conversations. Casual ones where he could overhear. "We're going to have to tighten our belts for a while," I told my wife one evening. He was in the living room supposedly doing homework, but I knew he could hear us in the kitchen. "What do you mean?" she asked, playing her part perfectly. "I don't know," I said, running my hand through my hair like I was stressed. "I might need to take some time off work. Figure out what my next move is. The market's not looking good right now." I started dressing differently. Nothing too dramatic. I wasn't going to show up in rags or anything, but less polished. I stopped going to the office every single day. I'd stay home more, work from my desk at home, but in a way that made it look like I didn't have anywhere else to be. Like I was waiting for things to change. I'd take walks around the neighborhood, and I could tell he was noticing. The version of his dad that was always professional, always put together, always confident, that guy was disappearing. In his place was someone who looked tired, someone who was managing something difficult. And the weird thing is, It wasn't even entirely an act. I mean, obviously the financial situation was a lie, but the stress of maintaining that lie, the weight of knowing what I was doing to my family just so my son could learn a lesson, that was absolutely real. By the second week, I noticed small changes. He stopped asking for money. Before this whole thing started, it was constant. "Dad, can I get some cash? Dad, I need money for... Dad, my friends are going out." But now, nothing. He'd just not ask. One afternoon, maybe 10 days in, he came home from school and went straight into the kitchen. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to look at job listings on my laptop. He opened the fridge, looked at what we had, and just started cooking. Pasta. Simple, cheap. Pasta with olive oil and garlic and whatever vegetables we had. Nothing fancy. But he made it. And he made enough for all of us. And when we sat down to eat, he didn't say anything about how the financial situation was affecting him. He just existed in it quietly. My wife and I exchanged looks across the dinner table. This was happening faster than we expected. By week 3, something more significant happened. He came to me on a Wednesday evening and said, "I got a job." I felt my stomach drop. Not because he got a job, that was actually the whole point. But because the reality of what I was doing hit me all at once. My son was going to go work minimum wage because he thought his father had failed him. "Yeah?" I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Where?" "Restaurant downtown," he said. "Washing dishes. They're hiring, so I went in and they said I could start this weekend." That's great, buddy," I said, and I meant it, but there was this twist in my gut. "Minimum wage?" "Yeah," he said. He wasn't upset about it. He was just stating facts. "But I'll be making something. I can help with bills if you need me to." And there it was. That sentence. I can help with bills if you need me to. My 16-year-old son, who 3 weeks earlier was demanding money to go out with his friends, was now offering to give his minimum wage earnings to his father because he thought we were in financial trouble. I wanted to stop right there. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say, "Hey, this is actually a test and you're passing and you can stop now." But I didn't, because I knew he needed to go deeper. He needed to live in this for a while. He needed to understand that you don't just make one good decision and then everything's solved. You have to sustain it. You have to keep showing up, keep working, keep believing even when things don't seem to be getting better. The first time I saw his hands after a full week of washing dishes, I almost broke. His fingers were all wrinkled and pruned, red almost. The skin around his nails was irritated from the hot water and the chemicals. He'd worked 5 shifts, 5 full shifts of standing in a dish pit, washing dishes, dealing with the heat and the mess and the chaos of a busy kitchen. He didn't complain about it. Not once. Instead, he came home from his shifts and either did homework or helped around the house or just collapsed on the couch because he was exhausted. Real exhaustion. The kind you feel in your bones. Not the kind you get from staying up too late on your phone. And his grades, I was checking his grades online because I'm still his parent, even if I'm playing this role. His grades started improving. Not because we forced him, but because he was being strategic. He'd do his homework right after school, before his shift, so he could use the time after work to sleep or just rest. He was learning time management. He was learning prioritization. He was learning that you can't just have unlimited free time because you have responsibilities that have to come first. By week 6, he was saving money. I found out because I overheard him talking to my wife about it. They were in the kitchen, and he was asking her if there was anything specific she needed. Not nice-to-haves, actual needs. "The kitchen light fixture is flickering," my wife said, playing along perfectly. "We might need to get that looked at eventually." "How much would that cost?" he asked. Like he was mentally doing the math of his dishwashing wages. That's when I realized this had gone beyond the original lesson. This wasn't just about teaching him that the world is hard. This was about him stepping into adulthood, into responsibility, into a different version of himself. And he was doing it because he loved his family. because he couldn't stand the thought of his parents struggling. But there was another side to this that I didn't anticipate fully. Or maybe I did anticipate it, but I didn't want to face it, the shame. It started around week 7 or 8. I'd notice it in small things. His friend Marcus came over one afternoon, and instead of inviting him inside like he used to, my son went outside on the porch to talk to him. They were out there for 5 minutes, and then Marcus left. "What was that about?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, he was just asking if I wanted to go out this weekend," he said too quickly. "But I told him I couldn't. Why not?" "I had to work," he said. And it was true, he did have to work. But that wasn't the real reason, I didn't think. He could have asked to switch a shift. We had that arrangement. But he didn't. He just said no, and he didn't invite Marcus inside. And then there was the thing with his other friends. I was at a coffee shop one afternoon. I was doing a lot of coffee shops and parks during this time, places that made it look like I was job hunting, and I saw my son sitting a few tables over with some kids from school, a couple of his close friends. I was about to go say hi, just casually, but I stopped myself. I didn't want him to feel embarrassed. But I stayed there long enough to hear the conversation. One of his friends was talking about their upcoming vacation. Somewhere tropical, some expensive resort, and someone asked my son if his family was going anywhere. "Probably not," he said quietly. "My dad's going through some stuff right now," and that was it. He didn't elaborate. Didn't make excuses, just stated it like it was something to be ashamed of. Like having a father who was struggling financially was a character flaw. I watched him for the rest of the conversation, and I could see it. The way he made himself smaller. The way he didn't mention his own accomplishments or his own life. He was carrying this secret, this knowledge that his father wasn't succeeding, and it was changing how he saw himself in relation to other people. That bothered me. And it kept bothering me. My wife started asking questions. "How long are we doing this?" She'd say in bed at night. "I can see it's affecting him." "I know," I'd say. "But he's learning so much." "He is," she agreed. But at what cost? That question haunted me. Because she was right. Yes, he was learning about responsibility and work and the value of money. Yes, he was becoming more grateful and more aware. But he was also learning to be ashamed of his own father. He was learning that love sometimes comes with the price of humiliation. By month 5, he'd stopped hanging out with most of his old friend group. Not because we forced him to, but because he felt like they wouldn't understand his life. He started spending more time with the people he worked with at the restaurant. Kids who actually got what it was like to work for minimum wage, to worry about money, to feel the weight of financial responsibility. I watched my son develop genuine empathy, real understanding of struggle. And yes, that was beautiful and important. But it came at the cost of isolation from his old life. He stopped talking about college, too. Or he would mention it differently. Instead of, "I'm going to UCLA," or "I'm thinking about Stanford," it became, "I'll probably get a scholarship somewhere," or "I'll start at community college if that's what makes sense." He was learning to lower his expectations, to accept a smaller vision of his future because he thought his present was constrained by his father's financial failure. And I was sitting in my successful company, watching this happen, telling myself it was necessary. My wife and I had less sex. That sounds weird to mention, but it's true. There was tension between us. She understood the lesson, but she didn't love what it was doing to our son, and I could see her point. I could see it every time I looked at him, but I also couldn't back down. I'd come this far. If I stopped now, if I revealed everything, it wouldn't have the same impact. He had to go through the full arc. He had to reach the point where this was his new normal, where he'd internalized it, where the lesson had really sunk in. At least, that's what I told myself. By month 8, he was saving money in a way that was almost obsessive. He had a jar in his room where he was collecting every extra dollar. The plan was to give it to me for bills and household expenses. I knew this because my wife told me. He'd mentioned it to her. Our son, who 6 months earlier was demanding money to go to movies, was now saving his dishwashing earnings to help his family pay bills. The lesson was working. It was absolutely working, but I was starting to question whether the method was worth the result. A Tuesday morning. Nothing remarkable about it. If you were watching from the outside, you would have seen just another Tuesday. My son was getting ready for school. He had a calculus test that day. He'd been studying hard for it because he wanted to maintain his grades. His goal was to get a scholarship, full scholarship if possible, because he didn't want to burden the family with college costs. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, reading the news on my phone, and my business partner called. The project we'd been working on quietly for months, the one that I'd kept going despite the financial struggles I was pretending to have, it had come through. Better than we expected. Significantly better. The kind of deal that changes everything. I listened to him talk about the numbers, the timelines, the next steps. And as I was hearing about this success, this real, genuine success, I looked at my son walking past the kitchen, his backpack over his shoulder, this responsible, thoughtful, empathetic young man he'd become. And I realized something. The lesson was done. He'd learned what he needed to learn. And continuing this any longer would no longer be a lesson. It would be a lie. Just a lie with no purpose. So I made a decision right there. I was going to end it. Today, I told my assistant to arrange a meeting with my son at my office, not my home office, my actual office, the one downtown, the one he'd never been to. When I asked him about it that morning, he looked confused. "Worried even? Is everything okay?" he asked. "Everything's fine," I said. "Better than fine, actually. I just want to show you something." He showed up at 3:47 p.m. I know because I was watching the clock. The whole day I'd felt sick. Not physically sick, but this deep, anxious feeling in my stomach. What if he didn't understand? What if, instead of being proud of him for rising to the challenge, he just felt angry? What if he felt betrayed? He walked into the building, and I watched him from my office window as he moved through the lobby. He was in his school uniform still. He went to school before coming here. His backpack was over one shoulder. He looked so young. How had I not noticed how young he still is? My assistant brought him up to the office. I stood up when he walked in. The look on his face when he actually saw me, at my desk, in my actual office with windows and a team and everything, I'll remember that moment for the rest of my life. And then I gave them the signal. Everyone in the office stood up. My entire team. We talked about this in the morning. I explained what I was doing, and I asked them to participate in this moment, to stand up, to acknowledge what my son had accomplished, to show him that he wasn't failing, that he was succeeding in ways that mattered. They applauded. The whole office just started clapping. For him. For this kid who'd been working at a restaurant saving money, convinced that his world was falling apart. His face went through about 10 different expressions in maybe 5 seconds. Confusion first, then understanding starting to dawn, then a flash of anger, then hurt, then this weird expression I couldn't quite place. Like his entire understanding of reality was reorganizing itself in real time. "What is this?" he said. His voice was quiet, small. So I told him everything. I told him why I did it. I explained that I'd seen him becoming someone he wasn't, someone who thought the world owed him something. I told him about wanting to teach him the value of work, of responsibility, of humility. I told him that the lesson wasn't about making him suffer. It was about helping him understand something essential about being human. "You were never poor," I said. "I was just measuring your character." I expected him to understand immediately. I expected relief, maybe gratitude. But that's not what I saw. He didn't say much at first. He just looked at me. And I could see everything in that look. The 9 months of worry, the 9 months of shame, the 9 months of feeling like something was fundamentally wrong with his family, with his father, with his life. Then he said something that broke me. "I felt like I wasn't your son for 9 months. That was it. That one sentence. Not the anger. He had every right to be angry. Not the betrayal. I'd lied to him in a profound and fundamental way. But that specific feeling, that I had made him feel like he wasn't enough, Like he'd failed so completely as a person that his own father had to stage an intervention, had to essentially disown him in a spiritual sense in order to fix him. We sat down in my office. My team dispersed, giving us privacy, and we talked for hours. He asked me everything. Was any of it real? Did I ever actually struggle? How long was I planning to do this? Did I ever consider that this might hurt him? I answered as honestly as I could, yes. I've struggled plenty of times before he was even born. No, I was never actually broke, but I lied to him. And I stand by that decision, even though I'm not sure anymore if it was the right one. I don't know how long I would have done it. Until he understood? Until I felt like the lesson had taken? I honestly hadn't thought that far ahead. And yes, I knew this might hurt him. I did consider it, and I decided that the long-term benefit was worth the short-term pain. But listening to him talk about those 9 months, about how he felt, about the shame and the confusion and the specific way it felt to be disappointed in by his own father, I realized something. You can be completely right about what someone needs and still be completely wrong about how to give it to them. He's 18 now. He graduated high school. He got a partial scholarship to a state university, just like he'd planned during those months when he thought his family was falling apart. He's studying business. I wonder if he chose that because of what he learned about work and money during those 9 months, or if it's just coincidence. He still works that restaurant job in the summers, by choice. He doesn't need to, but he does, and I think it's because he actually values it now. He values the work, and the people he works with, and the money he earns. He's got this groundedness, this awareness of the real world, that a lot of kids his age just don't have. He doesn't take things for granted. He understands that good things require effort. He respects his mother and me in a different way than he did before. But he's also careful with me. More careful than he used to be. Like he's not quite sure what I might do next in the name of a lesson. Like he's learned that his father is capable of orchestrating his life in order to teach him something. That's not a bad thing, necessarily. It's just different. We don't talk about those 9 months much. Sometimes something will come up and we'll reference it and we'll both kind of laugh awkwardly. But it's there. It's part of our relationship now. This thing he knows about me. This capacity I demonstrated to manipulate a situation in order to achieve an outcome I thought was good, and I think maybe, I don't know for sure, but I think maybe he wonders. Sometimes if there were other things I've done that he doesn't know about. People online, they'll see the headline. Father pretends to be broke to teach son a lesson. What happens next will shock you. Or something like that. Something designed to get clicks. And they'll read the story. And a lot of them will think it's beautiful, life-changing. They'll be inspired by the lesson, by the idea that sometimes we need to humble ourselves, that sometimes the hardest thing we do for our kids is make them uncomfortable. And maybe it is that, but it's also complicated in ways that don't fit neatly into an inspirational narrative. Because what I did wasn't just teach my son a lesson. What I did was manipulate him. I used the thing he loves most, his family, as a tool to shape his behavior. I created a false crisis in order to force a specific outcome. And yes, the outcome was positive. Yes, he's a better person. Yes, he learned things that will serve him well. But I also made him ashamed of his father. And I made him feel, for 9 months, like he wasn't enough. Like he'd failed. Like his family was falling apart because he hadn't valued things the right way. That's not a small thing. That's not something that gets completely erased by the revelation that it was all a test. There's this concept in parenting, maybe in all relationships, where love and control can look really similar, where good intentions can mask manipulation, where I'm doing this for your own good can be true and harmful at the same time. My son is doing great. I'm proud of him, but I genuinely don't know if he needed to go through those 9 months of shame and worry to become the person he is now. I don't know if there's a version of him, a version who learned these lessons through a gentler method, or through direct conversation, or through his own natural development, that would be equally good, equally responsible, equally aware. I suspect there might be, And I think maybe, just maybe, that version would also not have this complicated feeling about his father. This awareness that he can be loved deeply and also be used as a means to an end. When my wife and I talk about it now, years later, she has a different perspective. He learned what he needed to learn, she says, and he learned it in a way that he'll never forget. But that doesn't mean you should do it again. That doesn't mean it was the only way. She's probably right. What I know for sure is this: my son and I are good. We're better than good. We're close in a way that maybe we wouldn't have been if I hadn't done this. Because he knows I'm capable of extreme measures out of love. He knows I care about who he becomes. He knows that I'll do difficult things if I think they're necessary. But if I could go back and do it differently, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Because the version of my son that exists now, the one who works hard, who understands struggle, who respects his family, who has empathy for people who are actually suffering, maybe that's only possible through what he went through. Or maybe there's a different version of him, one who learned it all without the 9 months of shame, one who developed his character through a different path, one who doesn't have this complicated relationship with his father's capacity for manipulation. I guess that's the thing about parenting that nobody really talks about. You make these big decisions, these dramatic interventions, and you hope, you really, really hope, that the outcome justifies the method. But most of the time, you never really find out for sure. You just live with the ambiguity. You hope you made the right call, and you go forward knowing that your kid is doing well, while also carrying the uncertainty of whether you could have gotten there a different way. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my son's story, if you've been taking things for granted, if you've been coasting on someone else's work or success, I want to tell you something. You don't need to go through what he went through to learn what he learned. You don't. You can look around right now and see that everything you have comes from someone's effort, someone's work, someone's sacrifice. That's the real lesson, not the fear of losing it, not the shame of having it taken away. Just the fundamental understanding that nothing is free and everything has a cost. You can commit to working harder. You can decide right now to show up differently. You can appreciate what you have without needing it taken away to understand its value. You don't need a 9-month crisis to understand that. And if you recognize yourself in me, if you're thinking about orchestrating some big lesson for someone you love, if you're considering manipulation as a teaching tool, I want to tell you something too. Think about it first. Really think about it. Not just the outcome. Think about the cost. Think about what you might be teaching them about love and trust. Think about whether they'll come out of it understanding the lesson, or whether they'll come out of it understanding that people they love can manipulate them when they think it's for a good reason, because that's what my son learned too. And I'm not sure I can unhear him say that he felt like he wasn't my son for 9 months. Do I regret what I did? I don't know. Ask me on a good day when my son is thriving and I can see the direct connection between what he went through and who he's become. And I'll tell you no, I don't regret it. Ask me on a day when I see him being careful with me, when I see him questioning whether he can really trust me, when I think about all the ways that those 9 months might have affected him in ways I haven't discovered yet, and I'll tell you I'm not sure. The truth is, I'm living with both of those answers at the same time. I'm proud of what my son has become. I'm glad I was his father during this time. I believe in my heart that I did what I thought was necessary and right, and I'm also aware that I manipulated him, that I created a false crisis, that I made him ashamed of his family, that I proved to him that love can come with hidden conditions and complicated motives. Both of those things are true, and I think that's the real lesson here. Not for him, he's already learned his lesson, but for anyone watching, the real lesson is that life is complicated, that people who love us can also hurt us, that good intentions don't always produce good methods, that sometimes the best teachers are also the most complicated. And to my son, if you're watching this, I'm sorry for the 9 months, not because of what I did, but because of how I did it. I thought pretending to be broke would teach you humility, but maybe it also taught you something else. That love can look like distance, that lessons can come wrapped in silence. And maybe that's the part I regret the most. I wish I had told you sooner why I chose to stay quiet, why I let you believe I had nothing. Because the truth is, I wanted you to see the world the way I once saw it, when I had nothing but hope. I wanted you to feel hunger, not for money, but for meaning. I wanted you to understand that being rich doesn't mean owning things. It means owning yourself. But maybe I went too far. Maybe I confused strength with stubbornness. Every time I saw you pull away, I told myself, he'll understand someday. But someday came later than I hoped. And now I realize pride is a strange thing. It can build a man, and it can also build walls so high that even love can't climb them. You see, when I was your age, I swore I'd never become my father. He was a hard man, proud, distant, always teaching through pain. And yet, here I am, realizing I did the same thing to you. Maybe that's what legacy really is. Not the money, not the company, not the cars. It's the patterns we pass down without meaning to. It's the silence we inherit and the apologies we never learned to say out loud. I know you'll have your own family someday, and when your child looks up to you, or maybe away from you, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you remember that it's okay to be proud, but it's not okay to let pride speak louder than love. Because love, when left unspoken, starts to sound a lot like absence. I watched you grow up faster than I could understand. I saw the day you stopped needing my help, the day you stopped asking for advice. And I told myself that was good. That's what raising a man is supposed to look like. But now I realize raising a man isn't about letting go. It's about staying close enough to be heard, even when you're wrong. Those 9 months, they weren't just a test for you. They were a mirror for me. They showed me how easily love can turn into a lesson and how easily lessons can become regrets. So if you're watching this, son, know that I'm proud of you. Not because you finally saw who I was, but because you finally saw yourself. The man you're becoming, he's not perfect, but he's real. He's built from mistakes, from misunderstandings, from the quiet spaces where we both refuse to speak. And that's okay, because life isn't about clean endings or perfect resolutions. It's about learning to forgive the people who tried, even when they failed. So, I forgive you for the words you said when you were angry. I forgive myself for the silence I used as a shield. And if someday you have a son who looks at you with disappointment in his eyes, I hope you remember this story, and you choose to tell him the truth before it's too late. If nothing else, remember this: money fades, success fades, but the way you love, the way you show love, that's what people remember long after you're gone. So to my son, I'm sorry for the 9 months of silence. I'm sorry for teaching through absence, but I hope one day you'll see what I was trying to build. Not wealth, not reputation. Just a man who loved his son so much he was willing to lose him for a while just to help him find himself.